genes can be turned on and off. In most cases, Alzheimer's does not have a single genetic cause, but is influenced by multiple genes in combination with lifestyle and environmental factors. So if you have the genetic risk of Alzheimer's, you may carry that gene for a lifetime and never develop Alzheimer's. But what I'm saying then is that the genetics may load the gun, but your lifestyle and your diet may be the thing that pulls the trigger. Okay? The United States has the 8th highest dementia rate in the world. 8th highest for being a wealthy, developed first world country. And cognitive decline, for matters of fact, is significantly more common in developed countries, first world countries, than it is in undeveloped nations. Why is that? And not only that, it is increasing in developed countries at an alarming rate. And it is predicted that within 25 years, the incidence of dementia in this country will more than double. The question is why? And so, we'll go on to these now. The biggest reason, according to the scientists, if you would believe contemporary media, the biggest reason for the rate of dementia is increasing is that people are living longer. The older someone is, the greater their chance of developing dementia. As medical technology improves, people are living longer. Okay, so what they're saying is, according to contemporary medical reasoning, old age is the reason for dementia, and that the longer you live, the more likely you are to develop dementia. Okay? So, let's read the rest of the slide. Furthermore, medical technology, meaning diagnostic procedures and screening tools, has made it easier to identify people who suffer from dementia, easier to diagnose at earlier stages. For this reason, people are being diagnosed and treated for dementia at an earlier age. Okay? So, now, in the second statement, the rate of dementia is now being attributed not to old age, but to improved diagnostic procedures. So now, people are being diagnosed at an earlier age, which increases the number of people, leading to the rising incidence of Alzheimer's. But did you catch that? It's now no longer old age, because they're finding dementia in earlier years. And not only that, but the diagnostic procedures are the other reason why they're finding it, which means that their diagnostic procedures are enabling them to recognize people earlier, and help people live longer, supposedly. And so if they're living longer, now they're living longer to be old enough to develop dementia. And so according to this reasoning, medical technology is causing the incidence in the rise in Alzheimer's. So this reasoning is beginning to not make a whole lot of sense. Okay, and we're going to disprove it a little bit more. Okay, in fact, in one study, as of 2021, 5 years ago, China had the largest number of Alzheimer patients. And again, the trend there also is it's increasingly younger people. Is it due to improved testing? Or is it caused by something else? Spain ranks Alzheimer's research as a priority. It is a leader in the field of dementia research. Part of its goal is to improve diagnostic capabilities of their health system, which will lead to diagnosing patients earlier. Again, not all Alzheimer patients are old. And then, with the earlier diagnosis, is to select the most appropriate treatments. of which there are few, and none are effective in reversing cognitive decline. So what have we gained by improved diagnostic procedures? And what has been gained by diagnosing it in younger and younger people if there is no remedy anyway? It's backward. They're wanting to treat the symptoms, but they are unable to even stop it. And instead of going to the cause, and I forget what the man's name was, but he says the curse causeless does not come. There is a cause, and it would make sense to approach and research the cause as opposed to diagnosing it. And then what do you got? You got nothing. So here's another bit of odd reasoning. The article mentioned that dementia is a global health issue that is increasing in developing nations. Dementia is the highest in first world developed countries, with the exception of China, which cannot be said to be first world because most of its population is in poverty. So as countries develop, the incidence will rise even though the number of aging people stays the same. So again, it cannot sensibly, logically be related to age, except that in the sense that as one ages, one accumulates toxins, which reduces the body's ability to fend off other disabling factors. It reduces the body's ability to shut down certain negative genes and act or activate positive genes. But this is why China, which is known, at least in its cities, for incredibly bad air quality. China has the largest rate of Alzheimer's, but rural India has a lower rate. They get away from much of the toxicity. But not only that, why is it, if old age is the primary cause, then why do less developed countries have lower rates of dementia in their old people? It makes no sense. Is it because they haven't been able to diagnose them and it's really there anyway? And I'm going to say, no, that's not it either. There's a problem with that reasoning. In fact, the lowest rate of dementia in the world can be found in two indigenous tribes, their native groups in Bolivia, living in the Amazonian region. And those two groups were studied intensely, so it's not a lack of sophisticated equipment behind their very low rate of dementia, because they took in the sophisticated equipment to find out why is it that they don't have dementia. I have to correct myself. They have an extremely low rate. Why is it so low there? This group was actually searching for cause. So again, those old people aren't getting dementia. Why are American old people getting it? So in America, 3 years ago in 2023, 1 in 9 Americans aged 65 and older ended up with Alzheimer's. 2/3 are women. In Finland, it's nearly 1 in 5. What is the difference? What makes the difference between America and Finland? There are old people there also. It is a public health crisis, but it's not because it's aging. I call that a misconception. I would call it a lie, but I think the modern medical mindset is so long focused on that tree of aging that they can't see the forest of other factors. The standard reductionist approach is to boil every problem down to its most basic components, and they're looking for this single silver bullet in order to get rid of Alzheimer's. But they call it a monotherapeutic treatment. One medicine given to people to get rid of Alzheimer's. But they have already learned that the Alzheimer's medication doesn't work because it's only going after one factor. And Alzheimer's is a multifactorial illness. Okay? So, what they're hoping as in this work that you're going to be hearing about, is that you're trying to get rid of early onset dementia as well as dementia, because it's increasing in 30-year-olds to 64-year-olds, that age range. And that it has nearly doubled in the 12 years they've been keeping records of people from 30 to 64. That rate of early onset dementia has almost doubled. And so it's not due to aging. There is something else afoot, okay? The body is accumulating toxins, and when it can't handle them anymore, the abuse is so great the body breaks down. So, can anything be done? Not by the medical establishment. Existing drugs target a single target, but the disease is more complex. And as a matter of fact, the one who has done research on this says there is at least 36 factors, and trying to fix a leaking roof by patching one hole with a drug is not going to do it. The other 35 holes are still going to leak. So the other holes have to be patched. And so, one more point. Why do some aging persons get Alzheimer's and the others don't? Genetics, but a greater impact is family lifestyle, how you live, and what you do with your free time, and how you eat, and also what you eat. So, in many ways, Alzheimer's is not necessarily from the gene level, but it's from the habit level. Okay? So, in some family patterns, such as eating late, or sleeping late, or abusive interpersonal relationships, are either more beneficial or more harmful than any other genetic expression. And it makes breaking the pattern possible. And that will free you from a prison of wrong information. And so there's something else going on here that modern medicine can't seem to see, and it's this. Not only can Alzheimer's be reversed, but it can be prevented from ever occurring. It is not a natural result of aging, as we're led to believe. It's not natural at all. It is not in God's order that we be ill. He wants us in health for not only our highest good, but so that we can reach out to others, so we can serve our fellow men. And that's why He's given us the health message. This message that we give to them about dementia is so that whoever we talk to can have clear minds. Because if they're in cognitive decline, they're not going to be able to grasp this either. And one more person for whom Jesus has died will be lost to Him because of Satan's poisoning of our food and our healthcare systems. Okay, so why should we cooperate with the enemy when we have so much information to offer that will change lives? And think about this too. The developed countries are the ones that have the highest rate of Alzheimer's. And the developed countries are the ones that have the highest ownership and the greatest access to the Word of God. And if He can destroy our ability to access that, then He's won. And in the less developed countries, the third world countries, they have the lowest rate of dementia, but they have the lowest ownership of Bibles, the lowest ratio of people to ministers, and the lowest access to churches where they can hear the Word of God. So think about that for a minute. Satan attacks first where he can do the greatest harm, and that is in developed countries when we're dealing with this. Okay, so I've told you that Alzheimer's can be reversed and that it can be prevented, so I'm now going to give you the rest of the facts. First of all, it's estimated that over 40% of Alzheimer's or dementia diagnoses are incorrect. And you heard earlier that gluten can masquerade and have the same symptoms as Alzheimer's. And I told you about that ward in the Alzheimer's ward of a nursing home. Some of those people were able to go home because it was a gluten reaction. And there are other factors like that. Many reversible conditions mimic dementia. And there are, in fact, 10 common conditions that masquerade as dementia. So when it tells you, when the modern media and the modern medical establishment says that they're improving Alzheimer diagnoses, they're missing these common symptoms, common things that mimic Alzheimer's behavior, and they misdiagnose. We go to what those causes are so that you can investigate your own activities and prevent Alzheimer's on your behalf, also so that you can educate others. And again, I'm going to tell you that there is a clipboard here, and if you want this information sent to you, what I have, I will give you so that you can read it through on your own time and you can share with others, okay? So, the first slide, with nutritional balances and deficiencies, one of which I've already told you is iodine, and including low vitamin D. Gluten will interfere with your ability to uptake vitamin D. It will interfere with your calcium intake, your iron intake, and other minerals. And that's why DMSO is important, because DMSO that I talked to you about, instead of using, I'm wrong about DMSO. I'm talking about clay. When you put clay on your skin, minerals will be absorbed into your skin, okay, rather than if you use charcoal. So you can get, by using clay internally and externally, you can get minerals that you may not get any other way. The DMSO is a wonderful treatment for a million things, pain and so on, and I'll mail that to you also. But back to nutritional imbalances and deficiencies. People who have Alzheimer's are notably deficient in omega-3s, okay? And you can get omega-3s in places other than fish oil because there is a risk in fish oil of mercury poisoning, okay? Because as they work through the food chain, the larger the fish, the more smaller fish they've eaten, and they accumulate mercury in their tissues. But there are non-fish oil sources of omega-3s. They're deficient in B12. They're deficient in vitamin C, magnesium, selenium, and probiotics. A vegetarian diet, more than any other, is associated with slower cognitive decline. I got a direct statement that it is associated with less cognitive decline. And that means fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds, the health reform diet. Low vitamin D can be resolved by spending some time in the sun, and you can also buy an old-fashioned sun lamp. You can find them still on Amazon, and you can actually, turn it on. I would not recommend that you shine it on yourself, because I did that the first time and ended up with a nice sunburn. It will burn, just like sun will, but you can get vitamin D that way also. And low vitamin D also means you're not doing much exercise outdoors, so you could be indirectly making your situation worse. Coconut oil has been shown effective in improving Alzheimer's. There was one person, she had Alzheimer's, was asked to draw a clock. And this clock, a clock is normally round, and this thing looked like, it had most of the numbers there, and it had two hands, but it was not a round circle. And she was given coconut oil, omega-3s, and she was able eventually to draw a round circle, and it more closely, looked like a clock. Was it the only thing that would help her? No, because this is multifactorial. Okay, turmeric is known to boost working memory in just one dose. Can you imagine that? So, this one is a second one. Artificial food, food coloring, added flavors, and sweeteners. All of them. Aspartame is found in drinks. It impairs cognitive function, and aspartame directly leads to memory loss. And these are some of the things that can mimic Alzheimer behavior. Another one, medication side effects, especially pain and psychotropic drugs used for depression and anxiety and so on. And this includes statin drugs and Ambien for sleep aid. They may lead to schizophrenia. Statins are particularly harmful. In one study, 90% of the patients who stopped taking statin drugs reported improvement in mental functioning in a matter of weeks. In some of those patients, a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's was reversed. The sleep drug Ambien increases the risk of cognitive decline, as do the drugs for treating Parkinson's. The drug Sinemet, used for Parkinson's, it's a dopamine agonist. It's known to shrink part of the brain, and also some of the other drugs associated with Parkinson's and depression. They literally shrink parts of the brain. 4, inflammation from low-level infections, from mold, food allergies, other allergies, seasonal allergies, and Lyme disease. Inflammation is the body's attempt to get rid of a toxic element or organism, including root canal infections and urinary tract infections, whether they're known or still undiagnosed. Mental disorders result from neuroinflammation. Slide 9. Chronic, meaning unresolved or persistent stress and lack of activity, lack of mental stimulation, lack of social interaction. Stress, when you have it, increases cortisol levels, which leads to inflammation, which leads to hormonal imbalances, which leads to high blood sugar, high blood pressure, delayed healing time, cognitive decline, and susceptibility to disease. That's what stress does. The body's healing mechanisms depend upon the flow of blood, lymph, and other fluids, all of which require movement to get the toxins out. So if you are not active enough going for walks, then you are shooting yourself in the foot, literally, not literally, figuratively. Okay, sorry. Somebody remind me of that word, figurative. Somebody at the end of this, please remind me, because I want to tell you one more chapter in my book, okay? The inactivity, and also because the lymph is not moving, the blood is not moving as it should be, it causes blockages, and it interferes with healing on every level. One study showed that in a patient younger than 65, he'd been diagnosed with dementia. 41% of these diagnoses of people under 65 were incorrect. 41% were incorrect. The misdiagnosis happens most with patients who are depressed or under alcohol abuse. Here's another cause: thyroid, especially T3, and other hormonal imbalances. Many people diagnosed with dementia have low levels of T3 thyroid hormone. Most standard thyroid tests miss the T3 levels, and therefore it could be there, but you don't know about it. And it is believed that 10 to 15% of people in nursing homes may be there not because they have dementia, but because of a low T3 thyroid hormone. The cost of this is inestimable. You can imagine how many families are deprived of grandfather, grandmother, mother or father, maybe a brother or sister, in a nursing home because of misdiagnosis. How many children miss their father or their mother because of a misdiagnosis that can be avoided? This is inexcusable. Hormonal imbalances. That may be why women are more likely to get dementia than men. Women go through menopause earlier than men go through andropause. Another slide. Mercury amalgams and other heavy metal poisonings. Getting the amalgams removed at any age is beneficial because the mercury is not stable, and when exposed to heat or activity, it will continue to off-gas. And it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it destroys neurons without even directly contacting them. Removal, of course, needs to be done on a mercury-safe protocol. I didn't have my fillings removed until I was in my mid-40s. So from my late teens to mid-40s, all those years, mercury. And mercury exposure to mercury and other heavy metals causes systemic inflammation. Next slide. Environmental toxins. Air, soil, water, home furnishings such as mattress pads, such as the padding in furniture, the foam padding, cleaners, household cleaners, artificial fragrances in shampoos and hand creams and hairsprays, and so on. They're all artificial. They are chemical. They are not real, unless they will tell you that it is from essential oils. Okay. Particles in the air that we breathe in at home. There's a big push now that if you're wearing anything of fleece, that the fleece is often always giving off nanoparticles, and you're breathing in those nanoparticles, whether it's in your fleece vest or the fleece lining of your jacket, or whether it is the polypropylene. Is it polypropylene? Whether it's in your carpeting, because you're stepping on it and it's giving off nanoparticles, which you're breathing. And of course, they're warning against that. And you also know that physical and mental trauma can bring on dementia appearances. Physical and mental trauma, adverse childhood experiences, they cause traumatic emotional injuries as opposed to traumatic physical brain injuries, and also post-traumatic stress disorder. So WebMD mentions also the fact that sleep disorders such as apnea is also a contributor because your brain is not getting as much oxygen as it needs over the night. Again, these symptoms mimic depression, but if you know the cause, then you can correct the cause rather than let it get to even the diagnostic state of dementia. And a final one, as you learned earlier, gluten can cause or mimic Alzheimer's. So with the tools that are making us more efficient, like computers and electronics of all kinds, smart TVs, smart appliances, they disrupt the electrical field in our bodies, they overwhelm our brains, and thus make us unable to think clearly. And so what do we gain by this ultra technological sophistication? We gain a risk of altered ability to think. And so it's no wonder, with all of these things that you just read, it's no wonder it does show up in anybody's later lifetime. It is an accumulation of adverse effects of all of these. It isn't just one silver bullet problem and a silver bullet solution. It's a toxic body burden that we build up over the course of a lifetime. And because of technological advances, because the food supply is increasingly contaminated, it is affecting people younger and younger all the time. Now, most conventionally trained doctors are not experts in these causes. They're not experts in nutrition. They're not familiar with these causes. They don't know about gluten in many cases. But there is a website run by a nonprofit organization called Sharp Again Naturally. They are getting together a database to get the word out. It helps people find functional medicine specialists, naturopaths, or doctors who prescribe integrative medicine. And its purpose is to help people survive and thrive after cognitive decline and dementia. It's useful, and it parallels another helpful resource. These are few and far between. And remember, when I was talking to you Earlier, I told you about a free naturopathic consultation where you can order the clay and charcoal. That naturopath will talk to you for free. Okay? So there's another resource for you. Oh, yeah. So the idea, however, of Sharp Again Naturally is to help you live well with cognitive decline. But that is far from the ideal with not to live with cognitive decline in the first place, okay? But to reverse it, if possible, and obviously avoid it in the first place, because it's a lot easier to avoid it than it is to deal with it after it occurs. So that's why we went through those 10 factors causing it. But there's something more coming up. I talked to you Friday night about DMSO. And this is the DMSO Handbook for Doctors. You can get this online. I do recommend it because it's got like 30-some chapters dealing with a wide range of human illnesses and how DMSO has been effective in helping them in major ways. So I want you to know about that. It is a chemical solvent. It has been shown to dissolve the amyloids, those plaques that develop in the brain of Alzheimer's patients. It has been shown to dissolve those plaques, okay? These are the proteins that occur in the brain lesions of patients with Alzheimer's. When they do an autopsy of someone who's died from Alzheimer's, they find large concentrations of these amyloid plaques and tangles. In one study, 18 people with probable Alzheimer's were treated with DMSO and tested regularly for 9 months. Great improvements, quote unquote, after 3 months. Improvement especially noticeable after 6 months. Improvement in memory, concentration, and communication, less disorientation in time and space. And while I'm at it, and since I talked to you about DMSO, I forgot to warn you, or maybe I did and I've forgotten. But anyway, when you put DMSO on your skin, I would recommend that you buy a supply of swabs, because whatever you have on your hand, maybe you washed your hands and you didn't rinse all of the soap off. Whatever you have on your hands, that chemical solvent will push it into your skin. So it is, make sure your hands are absolutely clean, or else use sterile swabs to put the DMSO on the skin. With so far as taking it orally, I just take it in plain water. Okay. And this book on DMSO that you see on the screen, you can find from there what dosages the people took, whether they took it internally, applied it only externally, and frankly, if you don't have a way to take it internally, externally is better. IV is best, but many of us are not trained to insert IVs, so you do and you work with what you have. It is better than not at all, and sooner is better than later. Okay? And I mentioned this Friday night, but I'm going to mention it again. This one doctor said, I used to think that Alzheimer's and cancer were the 2 worst diagnoses you could ever hear. But he said, I think there's one that's even worse, and it's quadriplegia. And he said, but DMSO applied soon enough, so long as the spinal cord is not severed, there is hope for that person will walk again, will have full use of his or her limbs, if it's caught soon enough. But they have done DMSO on people where it has been, a length of time, and there has been partial recovery, which again, for those people, is better than no recovery. Okay? This DMSO handbook is written in lay language. It is not a scientific paperback, but it starts you on the research. It encourages you to look into it more. Okay? And again, the only drawback to DMSO is if you use enough, or maybe it's your metabolism, I'm not sure, but it does have some people using it have a garlic odor to their breath. Okay. Now, there's another source, 2 more books. This is research done by a doctor named Dale Bredesen. And this is incredibly important because you look at the titles of his book. This first book, The First Survivors of Alzheimer's, he had done an experiment. He could not initially get approval for a clinical study for the protocol that he uses, that he knows works. But they wouldn't approve him for a clinical trial because clinical trials require that you isolate only one factor, and if that factor disappears, then they know that your protocol is correct. Well, he knows that Alzheimer's is not a single factorial disease, and so he said, I can't do that. It won't work that way. I've got a protocol. And so initially they wouldn't even let him do a clinical trial. That has since changed, and he has been able to do the clinical trial. But this first book, The First Survivors of Alzheimer's, this is a story of 9 out of 10 patients that recovered completely from Alzheimer's. And I've read several of their stories. This is a beautiful book, and again, if you don't want to buy it, then encourage your library to get it just to spread the word. But there was one lady, she had to quit her job because she could no longer do it. She could not remember names. She couldn't remember how to do her job and was quite frightened as to the direction she was going. A friend told her about this man named Dale Bredesen and contact him. Well, she did. She became his first patient, and she recovered completely. And it gave, the word spread, and then he got 9 more people. One of the 10 did not recover. He's not sure why. It may have been that the person did not comply with the protocol. It may have been that the Alzheimer was too advanced, in order to reverse it. But 9 out of 10 is pretty great. And even if this book is not scientifically, clinically tested information, if I had Alzheimer's and I knew that 9 out of 10 people recovered from it, I would be on it in an instant, okay? The other book he wrote, and he's written others, but this is the other one I'm showing you. This is called The End of Alzheimer's, and in here, he does tell you what the protocol is. And so this is a more scholarly thing where he tells you about it. And Dr. Daniel Perlmutter, I know you may know that name. He's on the internet sometimes, but he wrote the foreword to this book. And he wrote, "The day has come, Alzheimer's patients are now recovering." And this momentous shift has not been brought about by the development of a meaningful pharmaceutical intervention, but rather by the multifaceted, personalized approach developed by Dr. Bredesen. The First Survivors of Alzheimer's takes us beyond the scientific validation of this program and reveals the depth of the personal narrative of those brave and pioneering individuals. They weren't brave, they were desperate. Individuals who chose to participate in this vanguard, meaning leading edge, iconoclastic, meaning outside the box, approach to their illness that challenged them and their loved ones to their very cores and rewarded them with recovery. That's the introduction to the book. Okay, also in this book, it has been written that everybody knows a cancer survivor, but no one knows an Alzheimer's survivor. And now you can hear directly from the first survivors themselves, the first stories of hope. This is a preface of his first book. Dr. Dale Bredesen's first 2 books presented his groundbreaking research and the protocol that not only prevents but reverses cognitive decline, dementia, and Alzheimer's disease. And now, at last, we hear from the first survivors of this formerly fatal diagnosis. These first-person accounts honestly detail the fear, the struggle, and the ultimate victory of each patient's journey. They vividly describe what it's like to have Alzheimer's. They also drill down on how these patients made the program work for them, the challenges, the workarounds, the encouraging results early on, that are so motivating. Dr. Bredesen includes commentary following each story to help point readers to the tips and tricks that might help them as well. And so what I want to show you now, his protocol, by the way, is this. It's individualized, but this is the basic of it. And it isn't anything you haven't heard before. It's just, do we do it? And here it is. Eliminate all simple sugars. Now, we know there are simple carbs and there are complex carbs, okay? But this is simple sugar, and these are simply pure sugar. Cane sugar, honey, agave syrup, yucca syrup, etc. Was another one, date sugar, another one. Eliminate gluten and all processed foods. And that means even if you think you can tolerate it, I showed you earlier today, you are not escaping the consequences of eating modern wheat. You cannot. And even if you don't eat modern wheat, even if you eat other wheat varieties, they still have gluten in them, and it would be wise for you to avoid all forms of gluten. There are plenty of grains that don't have gluten in them. Increase fruits and vegetables. Reduce your stress. He says yoga and meditation. We know prayer is better. Take melatonin nightly to make sure your sleep is adequate. Get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep nightly. Take B12. Vitamin D means supplement because you're probably low in it. CoQ10 and omega-3s. Optimize oral hygiene with an electric flosser, such as Waterpik or an electric toothbrush. Again, because bacteria forms in your mouth, and if you're not brushing with clay, which is my first lecture, if you're not brushing with clay, you probably have that bacteria and the acid-loving bacteria in your mouth, and not even on your teeth, but in your mouth as well. Optimize, I've read that one. Fasting between meals, no snacking, because snacking causes that bacteria to come right back, and it also exhausts your digestive system because you're always feeding it, and you're always calling upon the body to produce salivary enzymes and digestive enzymes, and you can wear out those organs. Fasting at least 3 hours between dinner and bedtime. And the longer you fast, between like 5 and 6 hours, the better. And exercise at least 30 minutes, 4 to 6 days a week, and especially outside, and especially in the sun, if you can. I noticed that you have issues with chemtrails as much as we do, where I'm from. And I noticed that by the end of the day, you have haze. So that means that if at all possible, get your walk in early before the sun is obscured. Okay? You need the vitamin D, you need the fresh air, and you need the exercise just for the movement of blood and lymph. Okay? Now, I'm going to read you, I'm reading from his book, The End of Alzheimer's. Okay? And I want you to hear the encouragement that he says. And I want you to hear it because even if you're not experiencing cognitive decline, and even if you're afraid that you might, or if you know somebody that will, I want you to hear these words, okay? This author, Dr. Bredesen, writes, "Let me say this as clearly as I can. Alzheimer's disease can be prevented. And in many cases, its associated cognitive decline can be reversed. I have shown in peer-reviewed studies in leading medical journals, cognitive decline can be reversed. Hundreds of patients have done just that. These are steps we can all take to prevent it. Experts have long believed it to be unavoidable and irreversible. Not so. Please open your mind and consider changing your life." And he says there's a group of 3 people for whom this book is especially written. First, those who are already suffering memory and cognitive decline, already suffering, and their family members and their caretakers. By following the protocol I described, those with cognitive impairment that is not yet full-blown Alzheimer's disease as well as those who are already in the grip of Alzheimer's, can not only halt, but often can reverse the cognitive decline they have already suffered. This is incredible news. If you've had a parent, well, I guess I can't go through that conversation, never mind. I can't get through without crying, so I won't do it. Second specific group that needs to hear this. This is a people who carry the gene APOE4. If they know, this is the strongest known genetic risk factor, and you can get tested for it to know if you have it. But if you don't do anything about it, it does you no good except scare you to death. So if you have the courage to find out if you have it, use it as a motivator to actively fight against it. He said only about 9 people carry the worst one of them, but from one parent is 30% risk increase, 2 parents is 50% increase. The vast majority of those with this gene don't know they have it. They find out only after they get Alzheimer's symptoms, and then they're tested for it. If you do it beforehand, you are well armed. Third group, this is the less obvious group. This is for everyone past the age of 40. The number one concern of individuals as we age is the downhill slide, losing our cognitive abilities. I can't remember something, whatever. And despite what you may have been told, again, it's not hopeless or reversible. He spends his first chapter encouraging you, giving you hope, so that you will grasp onto this hope, follow the protocol, believe that others have overcome it, and so can you, or so can anybody you know. And he says this book is not a scientific tome. It's an easy-to-use, step-by-step manual for preventing and reversing cognitive decline in early Alzheimer's disease or its precursors. And not only for preventing it or reversing it, but sustaining it so that you don't slip back into it. Okay, in 9 out of 10, you knew that. This program that he has is called RECODE, okay? And the RE is for reversing, the CO is for cognitive, and DE is for decline. So it's reversing cognitive decline, RECODE. That's the name of his program. Okay, so that is his message to you from his book. And now I want to show you something ridiculous. This is an article that is online. And by the way, this book, The End of Alzheimer's, was published in 2017. In that book, I just told you that he has research studies, he's got books written, he's been able to do clinical testing now, clinical research. This article is published in, let me go back to where I was. Okay, let me see if I can find it. Okay, this was published in 2023. Okay, so several years after his book came out, and it trashed his book. It trashed all of his research, and this is what they said. And I want you to hear this because it is ridiculous, and I want you to know. Okay. Let me find it. Excuse me, please, while I look for it. Here it is. Okay. This is the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia, Canada. In it, they tell us an important piece of information. There is a documentary coming up called Memories for Life, Reversing Alzheimer's. So that is the name of a video, a documentary that you can watch to give courage to other people. It'll soon be available on streaming services and is presented. Now notice all the sarcasm built into their wording. The film is presented as a documentary and highlights a treatment protocol for Alzheimer's disease, developed by Dr. Dale Bredesen and marketed under the name RECODE. The film and Bredesen's books and papers make a number of claims about a treatment protocol that has not been proven nor peer-reviewed. Now, this is years after he's got peer-reviewed articles in journals, in medical journals. To date, they say, there's been no clinically validated systems, medications, or lifestyle changes proven to reverse Alzheimer's disease. Well, up to his protocol, that's right. But they are so resistant to new information that they're claiming it can't be done, he's a fake, and don't go there. He talks about recommendations that claim to target these risk factors. Ladies and gentlemen, you saw what those risk factors were. They're real. They have everything to do with the health message, for that matter. And so it isn't as if they're claimed risk factors. They're risk factors for any kind of disease, let alone Alzheimer's. So how can they make that statement? You're going to find out why in a second. I told you about Bredesen initially refused the privilege of doing a clinical trial, but later was approved. He has completed a clinical trial, and he admits not everybody gets better. 1 person in 10 did not. There are things beyond his control, but the better results than any other option that medical, conventional medicine can give anybody, even though not all respond. So because not all respond, shall we not do this? 0 respond. Everybody without this protocol doesn't survive. So the article goes on that they write. He says, these changes, he says, while many of the lifestyle changes in the Bredesen protocol may indeed benefit people living with dementia in terms of supporting better quality of life, these changes cannot reverse or cure Alzheimer's disease. It's an absolute contradiction to what he's saying, and he's got the evidence. That's what's crazy about this. They're saying that Book of 10 is only anecdotal evidence, just what people say about what happened to them, but that can't be trusted. These people, their experiences need to be set aside. We will respect only clinical studies done with peer review. And they blind themselves to the obvious. Okay, they continue on. There is a significant financial investment required to undergo the treatment protocol, including the program itself, testing, supplements, alternative therapies, and special diets, meaning a vegan diet with organic foods and avoiding gluten. And he said, and they wrote, these treatments are not covered by provincial health care. In other words, they're not covered in Canada, most of it, but they're still covered under Medicare. They're still covered under health insurance policies. And so they say, you've got to go to your doctor. Your doctor is the only one who knows this, and your doctor is trained to tell you that it's irreversible. But anyway, this is what they say. Medical treatments and lifestyle changes while living with dementia should be implemented in collaboration with your primary care provider, because you're not smart enough to figure this out, okay? But the note is, but what if one can't afford a doctor? What happens if this war in Iran causes subsequent results in this country and you can't get to a doctor? What shall we not learn now how to prevent these things, to find out the cause and prevent it at its root rather than treat just the symptoms? And if the symptoms are already there, shall we not try the harmless things first rather than the drugs that don't work and cause side effects, every single one of them? So they're saying his findings aren't backed by science. In other words, you aren't fitting the mold. These are our rules. We control the narrative. And Bredesen has risked his medical integrity, his medical reputation by saying, they're wrong, this does help. Okay. The Alzheimer's Society of BC says that our ultimate goal is to enhance the lives of people living with dementia and their caregivers. So their purpose of this society is to help people while they're living with dementia. But if you can prevent dementia in the first place, that society isn't needed anymore. Do you get the point?
We get millions of dollars in
Yes.
donations.
Okay. So, again, you can get yourself tested with Alzheimer's. My mom had Alzheimer's. It's too late for my mother, but it's not too late for any of us. And how can we reach others if they're fighting brain fog, memory loss, cognitive decline? So we need to help get this health message out to as many as possible. And then follow it with the gospel of peace. Too many in war, or even in times not of war, too many are dying out of Christ. Way too many. And every time that happens, heaven grieves. And we can do our part to increase heaven's joy. So I'm asking that you do this. This is from Medical Ministry. Sickness, suffering, and death are the work of the antagonistic power. Satan is the destroyer. God is the restorer. The words spoken to Israel are true today of those who recover health of body and I messed that one up. I'll start over. The words spoken to Israel are true today of those who recover health of body or soul. That should be or. I am the Lord that healeth thee. The desire of God for every human being is expressed in the words, Beloved, I wish above all things, that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. And I thought, you know what? I need to look up that verse. Is he saying that he wishes above all things that we prosper financially and that we make a really good living and have good health besides? That's not the meaning of that word prosper. The prosper means to have a happy, content life. It has nothing to do with financial prosperity. It is to be happy and content. Okay? And the last one. He it is who forgiveth all thine iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases, who redeemeth thy life from destruction, who crowneth thee with loving kindness and tender mercies. May God bless you all.